Can you use your road bike as a gravel bike? Of course you can. All bikes are gravel bikes. But there are some things you can do to your bike to make it more suitable for riding off-road. In today's video, we're going to have a tinker with this, my rim brake Addict RC, and see how good we can get it riding off-road.
Tip number one is put the biggest tyres that your frame will allow on. We've got 25 mils here and we can fit 30s in this frame, so that's what we're going to go with.
This is probably a good time to mention today's video is sponsored by Styrkr energy products. If you have a lot of tyres to pump up or a bike ride to do, then you can get 25% off your first purchase of Styrkr bars and gels in the description down below. They do stuff like rice bars, which are arguably some of the best tasting bars you can get hold of. How do you know what the biggest tyres are that are going to fit in your frame? Check out the manufacturer's website or the tech docs supplied with the bike. Alternatively, if you can't get hold of those, check how close your existing tyres are to the edge of your frame in a couple of different locations. Firstly, up here on the front wheel by the forks, you don't want it rubbing the inside of the fork. Secondly, just here inside your chain stays, you don't want them to be rubbing the inside of your frame there either. Bear in mind that if you do ride like this and it is rubbing your frame, you can write off a frame. And lastly, front mechs. There isn't one on here, Jimmy. If you have a front mech on your bike, the inside of the tyre can rub on your front mech. GRX, the gravel-specific group set from Shimano, actually designed their front mech to be slightly further out, so this doesn't happen. But if you have a normal front mech, unlike me, then it could rub on the inside. So have a look at that as well. Once you're checking the front mech, also check out the clearance between your seat tube and the tyre in this gap here. Sometimes more aerodynamic frames will be very, very close and they won't allow for enough tyre clearance for 30 mils.
Tip number two is lowering your tyre pressure. Typically on road wheels, you run at a high pressure where it doesn't squidge very much. If you drop some of your pressure, then it'll squidge more. Squidginess is good because when you're riding off-road, there's bumps and knobbles and things that are not perfectly smooth. So having a bit of squidge means that it doesn't vibrate so much through the bike, through the frames, the saddle, through your handlebars, and you'll potentially have a more comfortable ride. It'll also increase the amount that the tyre deforms over those bumpy bits on the road, which means that you'll have more surface area on the ground and therefore more grip. More grip off-road is a bonus. When reducing the amount of air that's in the tyre, I would suggest starting small and making sure you don't go below the manufacturer's recommendations. A little bit, see how you get on with it, maybe try a little bit more. You can even do it whilst you're out on a ride, but make sure you have a pump so you can pump it back up if you take out too much.
If you do run lower pressure, you're at higher risk of getting pinch punches, where the inner tube is caught in between the tyre and the wheel when you hit a bump. To avoid this happening, maybe do tip number 3. Go tubeless.
We've just changed the tyres. Why didn't we go straight to tubeless? Got to do it all again.
Historically, road bikes will always run with inner tubes inside the wheel. That's what you'll find on most hybrid bikes, entry-level bikes off the shelf, but upgrading to tubeless is really beneficial. To achieve this officially, you need a tubeless ready wheel set and a tubeless ready tyre, a tubeless valve, tubeless tape, and tubeless sealant. However, non-tubeless ready wheels can be made tubeless in some circumstances, so it's worth having a go or asking your local bike shop if they think it is doable. With enough tape, anything becomes tubeless. We're going to explore that in a future video, by the way, so subscribe for that. Tubeless is, well, what it says. You don't use an inner tube at all. Instead of an inner tube, you just have a seal around the tyre, so there's much more tape or a better sealed layer of tape instead of rim tape around the wheel. And then you have a tubeless tyre, which is designed to create a nice seal along with sealant. How many times have I said seal? Seal, seal, seal. There's sealant inside the tyre instead of a tube, so if you do unfortunately puncture, the sealant is supposed to fill the hole. This works really well at lower pressures, particularly for off-road tyres. On the road, because the pressures are higher, it doesn't work quite as well, but sealant is getting better these days and the systems are working the best they ever have. The big benefit here is that it completely eradicates the risk of pinch puncturing, so you can run at much lower pressures without that risk. Do bear in mind that you can still burp your tyre if you hit a bump big enough, which will let some air out and probably some sealant, and if you really hit something big, then you can still damage your rim. So you can't go completely crazy, but it's definitely a lot better than running an inner tube inside an off-road wheel.
Tip number 4, double wrapping your bar tape. We have some hideously orange Styrkr bar tape that is also disgustingly expensive, that the only reason we have is because they sent it us for free and we've been looking for any excuse to use it. And finally, we found one. We're going to double wrap the bars because all of that extra padding makes it very comfortable. On the end of the bar, you have a plug which goes in and typically holds the tape in place. If you have 2 sets of tape, there is not enough space for this to fit in. So what we've had to do is cut the end off. The second tape is going to form the new end, and then the plug will push in and it will all hold into place. Doing it in this fashion, if you put the second tape on and decide you hate it, you're probably then going to need to replace the other tape. So it is a little bit destructive.
Tip number 5 is a product that we tested a few weeks ago, the suspension seat post. Now, this one is made by Redshift, but you can also look at ones made by Suntour. Specialized make one, Decathlon make a cheaper option, Cane Creek do one. There's loads of options out there, they all perform differently, so do some research, find the one that suits you. This one is a Redshift shock stop. We've actually tightened up the suspension slightly since our last test, and it provides a little bit of suspension underneath your saddle, making your ride smoother. It's not on very straight, Jimmy, is it? Tip number 6, suspension stems. This one's made by Redshift. You can also get one from Cane Creek and Vecnum. We actually have 2 of these. They make 2 versions, don't they? This adds a small bit of suspension underneath your handlebars, so when you're riding over bumps and lumps, it makes it more comfortable. This particular stem can be adjusted with some elastomers that you put inside. The Cane Creek one has a full lockout, so if you wanted to have suspension sometimes, but not other times, you might want to look at that one instead. Where'd you get this? This is what Doctor Who has.
What I don't know is the torque setting of that, so you probably just cracked your phone.
No, it's only on 1 out of 3. Suspension stems, suspension seat post, bar tape.
Tip number 7 is gear ratio. Typically, riding off-road, you want to have a wider gear range, and therefore gravel bikes, off-road bikes have a big fat cassette on the back. The cassette on your road bike probably isn't the maximum cassette that your rear mech can take. So what you could do, find out what the maximum is, put a bigger cassette on. Alternatively, you can change your chain ring, your cassette. What we're going to do with our demo bike today, which has Francis's stupid gear ratios on it, which is a 1x-road group set, stupid. We're going to take the cassette and rear mech from his gravel bike and put it on the road bike.
This really is a big cassette. The final thing you might want to consider doing is changing from road pedals to mountain bike pedals. This might seem obvious, but it makes an absolutely massive difference when you're riding off-road to be able to walk around. If you're riding on technical stuff, having to put a foot down and stepping down on a road shoe, there's no tread. So you're going to mess up your cleats, you're going to get mud stuck in them, and then you might not be able to clip in again. Whereas a mountain bike shoe has a much smaller recessed cleat, nice amount of grip, and you can clip in and out when they're covered in crap.
Have you noticed, Francis, that the more videos we make, the more we're advocating for SPDs? They're just really versatile for road cycling, for not road cycling. You just get around in them. It's a really, really good shoe.
Now we've made lots of changes to my bike. Let's take it outside.
Very fun, incredibly comfy. I thought this was going to be a crash fest, to be perfectly honest. But actually these road tyres, which are 30mm slicks, I've been fine. Granted, you haven't got quite as much grip on cornering or braking.
The only place this isn't good is really loose stuff around a corner. And unfortunately, there's not much we can do there. We've gone for the biggest tyres possible. Potentially you could get some with some like file tread, but even then, it's not going to make the biggest difference if you're going through a pile of loose gravel. So the big thing here is get the biggest tyres possible with the most grip possible that you can squeeze in to your road bike. Now we've made all these changes, I'm going to leave my bike like this. Maybe I'll change the bar tape to not hideous orange. Jimmy, say like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe.